I don't like pronouncing people dead. It's probably the worst thing that I've ever had to do. Homicide is the #1 cause of death for black men ages 15 to 34. When I became an ER doc, my patients look just like me. I want to preserve life. If I can't keep somebody alive, I've failed. I grew up in Brooklyn. I got robbed when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and it scared me. Seeing a lot of the traumas that take place at work or in the neighborhood, you realize I don't want this to happen anymore. I started looking at violence as a public health problem. CAVI is a violence intervention program. Our first goal was just to create this hospital-based intervention for people who've been shot and stabbed. We don't need to know who did it. That's not our role. We aren't police. What we're doing is being an advocate for the patient. We want to make sure that they don't come back for repeat injuries.
Rob Gore. That is Dr. Rob Gore. He will be featured in the CNN Heroes Tribute, which will air live Sunday, December 9th, 8 p.m. Eastern on CNN, and he's here. Voting is still open until tomorrow, actually, for Hero of the Year. He is one of the heroes. He should be Hero of the Year, so go vote. Go on CNN and vote, 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 vote for Dr. Rob Gore, and let me welcome him back to the show. He's been here before. He is an ER physician at Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn and the founder of Kings Against Violence Initiative, CAVI. Welcome back, Dr.
Thanks
Gore.
for having me, Karen. I appreciate you.
Well, listen, I heard you on Next Nation. And now you're gonna be a Hero of the Year. I'm gonna put it out there, right? Hero of the Year. And I was like, I'm really proud of you. You were on, I think, our first year on the air, if I'm not mistaken.
That was 2016.
Yeah, because I had this. No, then it wasn't the first year. You were here 2016.
Because I was still at TED. I had just finished my. I was finishing up part 1 of my TED residency.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were in a couple years in, because I remember I had this vision. I wanted to talk to a lot of doctors. Like there was so many things that I wanted to do that first year, and then first couple of years, and then not that I got derailed, but we added some civics things, and we did an app, and then that focus turned into like how can we make a difference in that space. But at some point I want to circle back and really talk about the medical field, because Wellness Wednesday was kind of born out of this notion that we have to constantly. Even as we fight for justice and equality and all these other things, if we don't take care of our health, and you've identified violence as but there's cause and effect.
Yeah, definitely cause and effect.
The #1 cause of death for black men between the ages of 15 and 34, homicide. But that's cause and effect.
Yep.
What's the cause?
It's multifactorial. And one thing that you start learning and like just looking at public health in a preventative point of view is that there are always multiple things that take place that affect healthcare and wellness. Economics, poverty. It's not just something circumstantial. Food, education. And if you look at the homicide rates in the black community and the Latino community, you often find places that people are impoverished. Education access is limited. You have food deserts. People don't have access to healthy food. And these are all conditions that can increase and create a great deal of stress. And when we're stressed out mentally, physically, spiritually, we don't make great decisions. And we respond to things like conflict or just basic human interactions in a very aggressive way instead of just talking about things because you don't know how to respond.
Watching the lead up piece on CNN, and the Heroes Tribute is live on Sunday, December 9th, 8 p.m. Eastern on CNN, and Dr. Rob Gore is one of the heroes. He's nominated, and maybe he'll be a Hero of the Year if you vote for him. Till tomorrow, the voting is still open, and we'll tweet out a link for that. But I was impressed by a couple of things. Number one, the room, all black men, young black men from the neighborhood. Just kids, teenagers, and you're having open dialogue with them, and they're actually expressing themselves, their emotions, because we are conditioned, because it's not just environment and lack of food and money. Black boys are conditioned through media, through education, through the system, through music, to be hyper masculine, whatever that means. Meaning, you step on my shoe, I may beat you down. We don't foster loving relationships among boys, because then you're a punk, And there was one gentleman, one young guy, he was heavy set, And he said, being teased, you just, I'm going to just beat everyone's ass. Say something to me, I'll whoop your ass, And he has grown to learn that that's not the best way to behave. And I thought that was revelatory for me. Like, conflict resolution is not just conflict. It's that, kids are having all of this pressure on them. And then there's a system that sees them as thugs, as, so you kind of behave the way people see you. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I even catch myself, sometimes behaving in a way based on the environment or what the expectation is, and sometimes going way beyond what what my normal is because of how we move in this world. How do you have that conversation, and how were you able to get that young man in particular to see himself differently?
So it's interesting. That young man, we met on the first day of school or second day of school a couple of years ago. Multiple kids had gotten into a big fight. First day of school, and this was beef that had stemmed from people that both groups weren't even affiliated with anymore. So we had to do a major mediation. And as I won't say punishment, but one of the consequences that happened at the event, the school administration said they have to participate in our programming. And so we started meeting with them. You've got a couple of things. One, there's a time and place to be aggressive. When you feel like your life is being threatened, fight or flight is going to kick in, and you're going to make sure you wind up being able to survive. That's understandable. Anybody's going to be like that if somebody backs you up against a wall. But what winds up happening is we feel like we have to be in this constant state of survival, so that we don't even know how to interact with people that disagree with us, that may come from a different background, that may have said something that may have been true, but you just don't like. You don't even know how to respond to it. We understand two basic emotions. We understand happy, and if you're not happy, the next thing is you can be angry. We're not melancholy. We're not pensive. We're not taught to be able to think about our emotions. Last thing you want to do is be labeled the emo kid because you're all in your feelings. And so what we want to do is make sure that young men and young women. So we have girls too. We have young women, our Kavi queens, and so it's not just young men, but just making sure that they understand how to express their emotions and how to express themselves, but being in a space and a place that allows people to hear who they are and value what they have to say.
Do we have to do the equal and opposite? 866-801-8255. We're talking with Dr. Rob Gore. He is the founder of Kavi, Kings Against Violence Initiative. So I guess Kwavi would be the Queens Against Violence Initiative. But if the leading cause of death for young black men between the ages of 15 and 34 is violence, homicide, why not devote that? I mean, President Barack Obama had a program for young men, and people were like, well, what about the young women? And it's like, sometimes it's just like having HBCUs, you know, sometimes you need to have, and you went to Morehouse, so you understand exactly what I'm talking about. But some white people are like, well, if we had a white institution of, why isn't there white history? Like we always get, there's a reason why. Your focus is primarily black boys, and that's okay.
Right. We wind up the young men and the young women both interact in very intimate ways. And when we wind up separating the groups, particularly in our workshops and our school programming, I feel like, and many people on our team feel like there's a very different type of dialogue that takes place when you only have young men. There's a very different type of dialogue when you have young women. We do have sessions where we bring both groups together, but that's not all the time because we want to make sure that people can be open and honest in their discussions. Not to mention sometimes hormones kick in and, you get the giggles and it takes a while just to kind of calm people down, which is understandable and we're okay with that. But I think young men and young women or people who identify as male or identify as female, I think they need to have specific places and spaces where they feel comfortable to talk amongst people of their own kind.
Rob Gore, Dr. Rob Gore is here, ER physician at Kings County Hospital. You were here before talking about Kavi. Just refresh our memory about why you started this group. You're a doctor. You don't have to do this. You can, do very well being an ER physician, which you don't have to do either, by the way. That's serious. That's rough, right?
You see some
things,
sometimes.
Right? So you're doing two very high trauma things, dealing with young black males around the issue of violence and dealing with emergencies every day. Why did you choose that path?
So I guess the first thing is just why I chose to do just community engagement and working with young people to begin with. My father's an activist and heard Dr. King speak when he was about 15 years old. When my dad grew up on the west side of Chicago, my mother's a retired teacher who taught in Bed-Stuy and Fort Greene for like close to 30 years. And so our dinner conversation was about community engagement. What's wrong? What's the problem? What's going on? Why don't you like this? If you don't like it, how are you going to fix it? So that's just regular conversation from the time I was a kid. So I've been doing this stuff my whole life. And then you move on to being at Morehouse and feeling like you've been charged with this mission to help give back to the community and provide opportunities that didn't exist. And it's like, okay, well, that's the next torch I'm going to carry or continue carrying. And I always wanted to be a doc. I had major interest in healthcare, but I looked at it as this tool to help engage people. And you mentioned something a little bit earlier before the interview started. You talked about wellness. We know about disease. We understand all the negative aspects that go on with our bodies, but we don't know what it means or constitutes to be well. And I wanted to bring all these different elements together. So the stuff that we're doing right now is no different than conversations that friends of mine had when we were freshmen at Morehouse College. This is no different. We've got different salaries, and the stuff that we talked about is not necessarily theoretical, but we're doing the same stuff that we've been talking about for 20 plus years.
Except you're not talking, you're actually doing.
We're actually doing.
And that's the place many of us need to get out of. Everybody has an opinion and a solution, but to actually put it into action, very few people actually do that. So applaud.
It's hard.
Yeah, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But then, either don't talk, right? So it's like blah 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 blah, and then there's nothing, no works. So why are you talking if you're not going? It's like oxygen.
It's crazy. So it's funny you bring that up. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, Dr. Melba Taylor. Shout out to Dr. Taylor and the Medical Roots Project. And we were talking about healthcare and wellness, but we were talking about why things don't progress. And people are afraid to experiment. People are afraid to fail because failure is associated with this discomfort and leads to all sorts of childhood memories where somebody told you weren't good enough to do this stuff. But if you look at, athletes, you look at creatives and designers, part of that and engineers, part of that process is to figure out what's the problem that you have at hand. How do we figure out some prototypes, launching these prototypes, and then keep going back over and over and over till you get it right. And matter of fact, you don't get it right. You're supposed to be constantly improving the situations. Right now, we've got different technology than we had 10, 15 years ago. Even just looking at violence intervention, when I first started looking at this stuff, this was in like the early 2000s. We didn't have social media. There was no Twitter. Facebook, Facebook didn't exist at that point. And so now you have all these other elements where you have cyberbullying. Nobody knew what cyberbullying was in 2004, but there are all these elements that have come into place, and we have to constantly evolve. And you're going to make some mistakes, and it's not going to be perfect when you first start, and you've got to be okay with that. Which is, big thing why people don't create their own radio shows, which is why people don't start their own businesses, which is why they don't become physicians and master educators. We are afraid to get things wrong, and because of that, we wind up staying and being comfortable with complacency and nostalgia.
Well, we've been conditioned to be complacent.
Yes, we very have.
And we've been conditioned to not realize that that whole perseverance is part of our DNA. We've been conditioned to ignore that part of ourselves. So I teeter between being super harsh and also super understanding about why people don't accomplish the things that they talk so often about, because the conditioning is almost indelible. Like, you have to fight so hard to unthink. And I think, fortunately, being exposed to things, anybody who's mainstream, I'm putting up air quotes, who's in business. And I remember sitting at the New York Daily News when Dan Snyder got in partnership with Morris Zuckerman because he owned the paper. And I've always been like, Fast Company reader of Wall Street Journal. And he failed miserably. Morris Zuckerman invested millions of dollars in him, and he failed. And he invested in him again, and he failed. And I was like, why? In my mind, why would you give him more money? Like, I couldn't understand it. Then the next thing you know, he's buying the Washington Redskins, and he's got all these other things. And you're like, so okay. So then you chalk it up to, well, white people let white people fail. But I think black people don't let black people fail.
No, we don't.
We don't allow for, and we don't understand that the failure, as you just pointed out, is where the success, you won't know how to do something better unless if you're putting a sports analogy, a 50% basketball shooter is a superstar. If you can shoot 50%, that's half your shots going in from the field consistently. If you in baseball, if you are batting 500, you're pretty damn good. That's half the ball. You know what I'm saying? If you shoot 40% from the three-point line, you're considered a great shooter. We need to rethink, and we need to allow our children, because I think this is speaking to this too, you know, giving our kids the license to try everything.
Yeah. I try, you know, it's funny you bring that up. I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been training for about 4 years, and I constantly get my butt whooped, and I'm training at Renzo Gracie Fight Academy. And,
why? Why are you doing this,
well,
Dr.
you know
Rob
what?
Gore?
I've done martial arts, you know, my entire life, or in some shape, form, or fashion. Taekwondo, capoeira. I boxed. You know, I snowboard, which is not a martial art, but it's still kind of hard on your body, and I constantly see how it pushes you. When you're in a stressful situation, one, you learn a whole lot about what you can handle and what you can't handle. Number two, when you keep, you know, putting yourself in these you know, being exposed to these harsh conditions, you learn a whole lot about yourself and stress when you got a 190-pound person trying to crush your ribs in class, and being compromised and having to tap out. Or being submitted. And then you keep, you know, after a while you go, you know what, I'm tired of feeling like this. And so you start looking, you know, what can I do differently? How do I train harder? What about my nutrition? What about my rest? What about my technique? One of the coaches and instructors said, you know why? He told me something that was a little bit harsh, but he said, you know why you're getting so tired right now? He said, because you don't train enough. He said, you got to keep training. There's no substitute for this. And I kind of took that as almost as an analogy that you've got to keep putting yourself in these stressful situations. I've done that with medicine. I've done that with starting the nonprofit. Why should it be different in any other aspect of your life? I think we just got to get comfortable. It's a formula,
right?
You know, people call it biohacking and stuff, but no, it's simple human experience. But we don't like to be subject to harsh conditions that, you know, especially if we don't think we can rise above those.
We're talking with Dr. Rob Gore, 866-801-8255. I just had this conversation about, because, you know, I'm can be perceived from the outside, especially, you know, family members, as a bit extreme. Like I've been called extreme, right? But no,
real.
No, but if you don't look crazy to the people around you, you aren't working hard enough. That's how I feel. If you're pursuing, whether it's retirement, I want to retire in the next 5 years, you're gonna look crazy. Means you're not gonna go out much. You're gonna be, you know, really, you know, saving every dime. If you want to physically lose 100 pounds. You have to do something really extreme and look crazy to the people around you, to the point where they're going to ask you if you're sick, because that's how hard in the paint you have to go. But very few people are willing to be uncomfortable enough, or they're worried about what people will think or say, and it always derails you. It's always the outside and the inside voices battling, right? But if you're not willing to look crazy, because you look, I mean, I'm saying you're a full-time physician. You have a nonprofit, which is full-time, and you find time to train at a high level. That's all extreme stuff. But you have to be extreme to get the results that you, and people don't get that.
No. The stuff I learn on the mat is translatable every other aspect of my life, you know. And, you know, I'm on the mat training a few days a week. I meditate almost daily because, you know, again, I'm dealing with a whole lot of trauma with the stuff that I'm experiencing, with stuff that I'm seeing, and stuff that I'm taking care of, both with the nonprofit and outside the nonprofit as a part of my clinical practice. And you have to figure out what you can do to kind of get back to that center place. And we always talk about pushing yourself to these extremes to find out what you're made of. You know, if what I was doing was, you know, work completely, then I wouldn't push myself. But a lot of stuff I've done, you know, didn't pan out so tough. You know, when we started, you know, I've been working on CAVI stuff with violence intervention work for, you know, specifically about 13 and a half, almost 14 years, where I started researching this stuff. And even when we started, we've had a lot of failures. You know, we've lost people. You know, people have died. We've hired folks who didn't necessarily have our best interest in mind. we might have lost some kids to the streets, into the legal system. Do we stop? No. You kind of go back, figure out what do we do right, what do we do wrong, and be okay with being in a space where people are going to be very critical of what you're doing. If you have, and one thing, you always have to kind of keep in mind is who is your team. If everybody on your team has the same exact skill sets and speaks the same, talks the same, and the opinions are always the same, then you're not going to be pushed. And so you want somebody that you want to have a very similar vision, but you don't want everybody with the same skill sets. Or, if that was the case, you'd have a nonprofit full of people with ADD who don't sleep too tough. And then we wouldn't get a whole lot of stuff done with our organization. So you want to have a level of balance.
That's called diversity in the workplace. 866-801-8255. We're talking with Dr. Rob Gore. You talked about wellness. Define wellness? What is wellness, Dr. Gore?
Wellness can be many different things for different people. For me, wellness is actually peace. It's a level of physical well-being. It's mental well-being. I love being in a place and space and waking up in the morning, and there's not a lot of negative mind chatter. Like, I like waking up and smiling. Like, I'm like, we watch Coming to America, and he was like, it's a beautiful day in Zamunda, and he wakes up and birds are chirping and the sun is coming through the windows. Like, that's how I like to feel. Do I feel like that every day? No. Are there things that I can do to help put me in that situation? Yes. Yes, I can. And wellness it's a way of life, and it's a practice that is constantly evolving. What we used to eat when we were 10 or 15 years old, we can't eat at 25 or 35 or 45 plus. Our bodies just can't process that. But what we say and what we do is also very different from when we were 10, 15 compared to now.
Hold that thought, because I have more questions for you. And if you got questions for Dr. Gore, please call us. Also, we're going to give away another book in the next hour. It's the Karen Hunter Show. We'll be right back. Dr. Rob Gore is sticking around. Man, our in between conversations, powerful. We were talking wellness. Two things I wanted to talk to you about. You recommended a book. We'll get to that in a second. But I know right now, I'm struggling to get to a place physically that I've wanted to get to, and it feels like forever. And it's like no excuses at all. But it's so hard sometimes to stay on the program, and do, and I'm type A. Like, if I just locked in, but I'm struggling. You got anything for me?
I got something for you. One of the things we talked about in terms of just overall health and wellness is you have to tweak your environment. If you know that you only we're talking about exercise in particular. I mean, the nutrition part, that's a whole seperate conversation, and I think we need to do a whole episode on that.
So let's pause. Easy nutrition. Sugar, salt, fat.
Yeah. You need those things as a part of your diet. You want to minimize the processed stuff. If you've got 10,000 ingredients and something is coming from a package, it's probably not for you. If you got 2 or 3 ingredients in a package, it's probably a little bit better. If you can go to the source itself, get the whole fruit, eat the nuts itself, and not get something in some random package, then that's probably a lot better for you. And you got to hydrate. You got to drink water. None of that smart water stuff. You can do that. You can alkalinize your water with some lime juice and a pinch of sea salt. You don't have to spend $400 or $5 on
a bottle of water because it's 9.5 whatever pH.
Yep.
What are you vegan?
For the most part. Once in a while I'll eat eggs, but I'm vegan for the most part.
So no meat though.
No meat.
You look amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I just want to say that.
I found out I was allergic to a whole lot of things, and so a lot of stuff, my dietary habits morphed out of tired of being sick. Walking around with snot bubbles.
Doctor?
You can't, nose running, throat itching.
Farting a lot?
I mean, that's just guys in general. I mean, you want to make sure you can get a loud one in depending on who you're around. But I got tired of being fatigued and having all sorts of allergies, and so I started tweaking a lot of the stuff that I was eating and eliminating processed foods.
Wow. Yeah, So, and it's helped your
It
workouts, I'm sure.
helps workouts, the meditation, the recovery. I just finished listening to a LeBron James podcast with Tim Ferriss and one of his coaches, and they were talking about the recovery period. People, we go out and we work out like crazy, but as we get older, our ability to recover from those workouts starts to change, and so the stretching becomes important, the hydration, the post-workout nutrition. We got to do it. You know, a lot of times, you know, we've got these issues with our hips and our knees, and some of that's just purely because our hips are tight, which leads to a lot of lower back strain. And then we start hunching over, and then we don't want to move because every time we go to the gym or run, it hurts. And so
we've compounded our own fractures. We've created an environment to not do our best because we aren't doing the little things.
Right. We optimize one thing but failed to optimize something else, and so we got to figure out the balance. But we talked about specifically about working out. If you got 5 minutes, then work out for 5 minutes. Some of my neighbors clown me. They're like, "Man, you just ran around the block for 5 minutes." I was like, "That's all I got today," and I felt better for it. Or 10 minutes. If you got an hour, then you got an hour. But the goal is to maintain that level of discipline. If you got 10 minutes 5 days a week and you got an hour those other 2 days, then you only got 10 minutes those days. But we also talked about if you can increase your walking. You can walk a little bit further. You can park your car further. You can get off at the train stop before you normally get off. And these are like minor tweaks that are something that it can be a deliverable. We want to have confidence, and if you develop a level of confidence in completing a task, you'll probably go back and perform that task again. If you fail at it miserably, like going for a 2 or 3 hour workout and you ain't worked out before in your life, you're not gonna get back up the next day. And so you want to think about what it is that you can be a deliverable.